I didn't see that it was recording.
Makes us so much more relatable having a little bit of fumbling at the start.
Oh, yeah. Welcome to Know What I Mean. My name's Oscar.
And my name is George. This week's quote is, well, I thought it was from A.A. Milne, but we're going to get into that later. Anyway, the quote is, "Weeds are flowers too, once you get to know them."
So in this week's episode, George realizing that he actually is a flower. Talk about a story a story of mine where annoying neighbors lead to awakening, and it relates to the Big Bang Theory and how we've dealt with the weeds in our lives.
Roll the jingle.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, sounds good.
Sounds crisp. I think the novelty still hasn't really worn off for me.
Of having an actual microphone. Yeah. All right,
Maybe
Mr. Ryan on board. Don't get ahead of yourself.
Yeah. It will definitely last as a purchase. The novelty will last longer because I only get out once a week, for a special occasion. Maybe it will never wear off. Maybe this will be the one item that the novelty of buying will never wear off.
If not, you can always buy something else, and hopefully that one will do that for you.
Yeah, suppose we should get on with an episode.
Let's do it. This week's quote is, "Weeds are flowers too, once you get to know them." Now, already we're getting into the weeds because I looked up, after telling everyone that it's an A.A. Milne quote, I looked it up more deeply because I wanted to find, where's the passage that it's from? What story did it occur in? And I've been searching. It's such a commonly used quote, but I literally couldn't find anywhere that said where it's actually from. One quote website said it's, and I quote, "generally attributed to Eeyore," which is Eeyore is one of the characters in it. So that, even within the story, it's like most people seem to say that it's from this one character, but clearly not exclusively. I'm sure there's plenty that say like Winnie the Pooh having said this. Also, the site that I saw said that this was a misquote and that it's actually not from the A.A. Milne version. It's actually from Disney. I was kind of disappointed about that, to be honest, because I had this idea of what the quote was with it being from A.A. Milne, and I felt it really changed my perspective. And today I realized, though, that the quote was actually a weed in a way. So the definition of a weed is a plant considered undesirable in a particular situation. Essentially, it's a plant in the wrong place. What happened with this quote was I saw it as being in the wrong place. I saw it as a flower because I was like, oh, this comes from A.A. Milne. I think he's an excellent writer from reading his stories as a kid, and he's got lots of other great quotes, which now are obviously all thrown into question as well. But now that I see it as being from Disney, I see it as a weed because it's in the wrong place. It's still the same quote, but it's in a different context. It's like in the garden of Disney, where I just think of it being like, just there to make money, not really focused on being meaningful, just trying to profit. It's not in this profound garden of A.A. Milne, of this cool philosopher, mathematician who wrote these beautiful children's stories. I was just disappointed to find that. But then I kind of realized that it really hasn't changed the quote, just the fact that it's in the wrong place. A quote from Disney shouldn't be in my garden of good quotes. It's pretty cringy to be quoting Disney.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I thought that was a really interesting process, realizing that this quote ended up kind of being a weed for me in that way.
Yeah, no, that's ironic, isn't it?
Does that change how you think about it?
I mean, I'm actually, as you were saying that, my initial response is I'm just going to treat it like it is from A.A. Milne. That's, that's what my notes are on. And Disney or not, or just God knows where it's from. It's a nice quote. When you read it out last week, I really appreciated it, and I've been thinking about it a lot this week. So I'm going to take the stand that context can just be thrown out for this week.
All right. Screw it. Well, I've decided I like it anyway as well. So
yeah.
As I was looking through the quote, I tried to distill it and just really think about it as a process of something that you do. There were kind of 3 core steps from the quote. The first thing is the noticing of the weeds. You're naturally going to notice things come up in your life where you feel like it's something in the wrong place, something that's not how it should be. Maybe it's a thought, maybe it's a person, an action. It could be anything, but it's just every time your brain says, this is wrong, this shouldn't be here. That's what it is. And it's something that your subconscious mind is always paying attention to these things, and it will notice things. And I think it's really important to pay attention to those things that it brings up and just get to know them, as the quote says. If something comes up that you don't like how it is, get to know it rather than just kind of ignoring it and hoping it will go away and not paying attention to it. You need to like really get down, get into the dirt and just examine it and be like, so what is this? What sort of plant is it? Where does it come from? How does it spread? What does it look like when it's fully grown? Like really try and understand this thing. You don't need to do this for every single weed that comes up, because once you do it for something similar, you can be like, oh yeah, this is kind of like that other thing I thought of before. So it's not like you need to do this every single time you notice something negative, something not as you want. You can start to kind of understand them and categorize them, and it will make it easier to deal with negative things that come up in your life because you've dealt with similar things before. You'd be like, oh yeah, this is like that other situation. I know the best place for this. And that kind of brings us on to the third and final step, which is putting them in the place where they need to go, finding the right context for it. Because as the definition says about a plant being in the wrong place, you're understanding the plant. And once you understand it, you can understand where is the appropriate place to put this plant. Maybe it needs more care from you. Maybe it's a house plant or something. Maybe it's something you want to have in your garden, or maybe it's something that's a weed to you, but a flower to someone else. It's something that you could share or give to someone else. And also, I think it's good to remember that some weeds, maybe the best purpose that they can serve is you just put them in the compost and then they fuel other flowers.
I'm wondering with that, as this quote is, metaphor, and you were kind of talking in metaphor there in a way, as it weeds symbolizing something. I was just wondering if there was any examples you have of, well, first of all, in your life, what would be a weed? Like, what have you noticed that actually is a weed? Is that something emotional, or is it a situation? Or
yeah, so it can be all sorts, all of those things. But there was one particular story that it brought up that was actually, I kind of realized today. I grew up in Brighton and I've been here for most of my life. I went to uni for like 3 years in Bristol, but for the majority of my life, I've been here. And I've often kind of felt maybe that I would be better off living in a different city or a different country or something like that. That was thinking of myself as the weed in that context of like, I'm maybe not in the right place where I belong. Just today, I was thinking about I could be happy or sad in any location in the world, and the place is what you make it. And that I've got my family here. A lot of my friends still live here, or at least it's like a base that they still come back to. It's a great city to live in. I'd like to commit to living here. I felt that maybe I should be somewhere else. Even it not being super concrete in my mind of like where I should be, a slight feeling of discontent, or even maybe some of the reason why I'm not living in permanent bliss is to do with my location. That's something that I've just had as a little thought. It's not been something that's felt huge, but it's definitely something that's been in my mind for a long time. And yeah, it was nice to actually realize this is somewhere that is the best place for me to be, because it's so important to have my family here, to have a base where friends are, and it's an awesome city as well. I can't think of anywhere better than that for me to live. It was really just that realization that made me kind of settle and be like, this is a good place. Like, I'm in the right place. This is where I should be. And yeah, feels good. So I am now the flower. So Watch me
When
bloom,
you've got to know it.
bitch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
cool. Sounds like from what you've said that the weed is a symbol of, they have the image in Buddhism. It's like a wheel on a cart that's slightly, it's not sitting on the hub quite right. And so as it's going along the path, it's kind of squeaking. It's not quite right. Like there's a suffering in that, there's a wrongness to that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And the weed is similar. It's the idea that this is inappropriate, this is not what's supposed to be happening or what's supposed to be going on, what's supposed to be here right now is the weed. One of the main bits that I was thinking about with this quote really was that the weed as being something unacceptable or like undesirable is a story essentially. I was on retreat and this guy was talking about as he'd been meditating more and becoming a lot more present in his life. Like he did gardening and he had found it really interesting to notice his attitude towards weeds changing, because he was looking at them and in certain states he couldn't distinguish between a weed and a flower or a weed and the rest of his garden. He was noticing with the conceptual model of this is the acceptable thing and this is the unacceptable thing in direct experience when he was just being present with his garden, that there wasn't any distinguishing factor. It's the same. There's a plant and it's in my experience and it has a particular color. He actually found that those boundaries became blurred. And I think that's definitely like one aspect of this quote that I found. So it's like once you get to know them, then weeds become flowers. That distinction between them goes and you can't tell the difference anymore. And it reminded me of something that you said, this was a few years ago, but how if you're thinking of weeds in terms of an emotional sense, then you have desirable and undesirable feelings in your body. But I remember you saying that excitement and anxiety are like the same experience in your body. It's a certain tension, you're quite heightened, your senses are quite heightened and things, but one you say is acceptable and one you say isn't. Yes, that was quite a big point that I was thinking about.
I was thinking about how like, does just the awareness make it a flower? Is there something about accepting the weed that can make you see the beauty in it? That was what I initially thought. There's some frames of mind where that is true, where, like you said, with the garden, there is a way where you can, look at it and just see it as life. But there are also times where you could be like, well, no, this is my garden and I do want my cabbages to survive. So they need light. So I am going to get rid of these ones. I think that there are times when both things can be true. And I think quite often what it is you can be aware of it and not judge it, but maybe say this is, maybe it's beautiful in one context, but right now this is not what I want here. And you can take action to move it to somewhere else. What do you think about that? The difference between choosing, okay, this should actually be somewhere else versus just accepting where it is.
I think they're equally valuable in approaches for different times. I think it's probably not a sustainable state to be just seeing, it might be the enlightened mind, I don't know, but not seeing those distinctions at all. I don't think that's maybe sustainable, but I think that it's very liberating to, when that does happen, to really recognize that I'm dealing with labels as opposed to some fixed reality of weedness and non-weedness or flowerness, and there's that model. And I find that if this is kind of broadening out to life, you need time where you're doing that. You need time where you're allowing your conceptual model of things to fall away and just being with this open sense of awareness of things in a very indistinguished way. I think it's just a relief to see things in that way, but it might not be sustainable. And as you say, like then coming back into a duality, because that's it, then you come back into a world of duality, you come back into a world of separateness and better and worse and pleasurable and painful, and that's the more ordinary existence. And then it is a case of saying, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to de-weed my garden, or I'm going to acknowledge these uncomfortable feelings that are happening inside me, and I'm now going to do what I can to uproot them or change them, but not in a way, I guess, because I guess the usual model is either to ignore them completely and let the weeds become overgrown, or to get very frustrated at the whole process. You know, they just keep on coming up and you keep on having to take them out, or, you know, like, but then the middle is like accepting that weeds inevitably come up. Like, that's just going to happen. And if you want a nice garden, you're going to have to de-weed and uproot them. But doing so in a way that is patient and has, you know, because this quote has a lot of humor as well, and has like humor and like a lightheartedness about it, realizing that this is an inevitability. This is just part of life, you know?
Yeah. And I think you're right that it does change your attitude towards them, because you're not saying that this is a weed, this is bad, flat out. You're saying that it's a plant in the wrong context. And I think how we use normally the word weed, I think it kind of is used with a different definition. When I think of a weed, I will think of like a bad plant. There's certain plants that are not good plants. But I can see that this is really a process of like, let me have a look at this plant and see in which context it is a good plant, like in which context it's going to be useful. I was actually thinking of at university, for example, when I was sharing a flat, there was someone there who I decided that I don't want to be involved with financially, because they weren't very organized. When you're kind of having to all pay rent for a shared place, it was not fun to deal with that person. They just weren't very together with that sort of thing. It was very frustrating. It's someone that I do want in my life because he's a great person to hang out with, but I don't want him involved with me financially. There's some people who, okay, this person's great, but maybe they're great if I'm having a house party. But if I just want to have a few people over, I'm not going to invite this person. Like, it's just finding out where is somewhere that you can appreciate this person and enjoy, you know, your friendship or relationship with someone, but in a way that doesn't damage you. And I think it's good to just have that awareness, because you can be a better friend to them and make sure you're not jeopardizing your friendship by, like you said, say if there was someone who, is great fun to have at a house party, or maybe even at someone else's house party, not your own house, but you wouldn't want to have them like chilling with a couple friends at your house. If you do feel like you need to invite them to those things, then you're just going to end up resenting them, because you realize like, I don't actually want this person here. I'm just invited them because I feel like I have to. In that case, you're putting them in the wrong context and treating them like a weed.
Yeah, it's a funny quote to go into with this, because I was thinking about it in relation to people as well, but I kept on being like, this is going to make it sound like I'm calling people weeds, which like, you know, one thing I was thinking about was, what are qualities of weeds that are good, you know, and that we do actually appreciate, that we don't see because of we're saying this is the wrong place for this thing, and therefore we're just totally rejecting it or throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Weeds are resilient and tenacious. They power through, and they're also ancient as well. You know, they're like, those sorts of plants will have been around for a really long time because they know how to survive. I think there are qualities within ourselves and other people that they're not flowers, they're not so lovely, but that are very necessary qualities to have. I think even something like anger, which would definitely be seen as a weed emotionally, I think there are times when it's very necessary to get angry, you know, like it may be the last port of call for like defense or something like that. So we might have just shunned it completely, but there are actually times when that's very, very helpful.
I think with anger as well, that ties into finding the right place for it, appreciating that it's something useful. If you didn't have any part of you that got angry, that would be a defect. It's good to have that emotion surface sometimes. There are times when you need it in certain contexts where being angry is the appropriate response. However, there's times where anger is not appropriate. Maybe appropriate's the wrong word, more like not helpful when it can arise. If it's constantly, say if you're commuting or something and you get annoyed with other drivers and you spend like a large part of that day being angry, that's not the right place for anger in your life. It's not a helpful place to have it. People can go say, okay, anger is a weed. That's an emotion that I don't want ever. So it can be repressed. And when you repress that emotion, it can end up coming out in unhealthy ways. We talked about this a bit in the previous episode about a shadow side, how that can come out when you're not facing all the aspects of yourself.
Yeah.
When you're kind of repressing emotions.
Yeah, I kind of imagine it like it's like when they dump waste into rivers and stuff and it ends up poisoning the water, you know, so you're kind of getting rid of it, but then it ends up kind of permeating and poisoning the water. But yeah, as you say, like there was one other thing. I don't know how far to stretch this metaphor, but part of my work is that I design kids books, and the one I'm designing at the moment is about bees. And in that book, then it actually says it's really important to let weeds grow because they're really helpful for the bees. And I just thought that was a nice, I don't know why, but I mean, there's something like very nice about that, you know, in just that it may be something that we choose to reject, but actually for others, it can be really helpful or like a really, really positive thing, this kind of more rewilding and things. But I'm not sure how that links in. I just thought it was like a nice thing that I saw today that felt connected somehow.
Yeah. Well, I guess for the bee, it's not a weed because it is in the right place. It's just a conflict of two different entities having different ideas of whether something's where it should be.
Yeah.
The gardener thinks that this shouldn't be in his garden. The bee is happy that it's in the garden. Yeah. And that's kind of the source of conflict. It is essentially, I think this should be in this place. I think I should own this place. I think I should have this. And then someone thinks, oh no, I don't think you should own this. It's just a conflict of people having two different ideas of how they think reality should be. And that's it. It's something that's a flower to someone and a weed to someone else. That's how you can spread the metaphor even further. Like the breeze spread pollen. Oh my God, on fire.
The second really big thing that I thought of, that even the seemingly worst situations have very valuable lessons to be learned. So this familiarizing yourself, getting to know these stubborn kind of difficult things can be very transformational. When me and my girlfriend Amy first moved to Manchester, we moved into this very beautiful converted warehouse. As soon as I walked in, like I knew we were going to live there because it was just so beautiful. But what we didn't account for was that it was like a set of apartments in this converted warehouse. And the walls between the apartments were like, I don't know if they just used plasterboard, like a single sheet of plasterboard, but they were like, so like you could literally hear everything that was going on next door. So one evening I'm sitting in my favorite chair and Imi is snoring, and next door I hear the TV come on, and the guy next door is playing Big Bang Theory, and I hate that show so much. I think it sucks. And the theme tune is blasting through the wall. And this has been happening the last few nights. The problem with it is not just because it's really annoying, is that Imi works in a school and she has to get up really early, sort of like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. Whereas the guy next door works in bars, and like our clocks are completely different. This theme tune comes on, like the whole universe was in a hot damn state, you know, that one, and it's really, really annoying, and it's thumping through the wall, and my anxiety just shoots up because the issue that we've had is that Imi's woken up the last few nights, and once she's woken up, then she struggles to get back to sleep again, and then this whole situation has ensued the last few nights of having to go and knock on the door, and it's just like having this awkward conversation. It's just really horrible. So I'm now conditioned, like, was it Pavlov's dog or something like that? I'm conditioned to hear this song and like my anxiety going up. So I'm sitting on my chair and just thinking, like, is Imi going to wake up? Is this going to be a situation? My heart's thumping and I'm just feeling very anxious about it. And basically I see that there's two options. It's a bit of a sink or swim situation. The first is that I'm just going to sit here and be incredibly anxious and maybe try and distract myself a bit. But the second is to actually try and get to know what's going on. So I'm sitting there and I just listen to the TV next door, which really feels like it's sort of hitting into me. Like all the sound is really, really hitting in something. And the first thing I do is I imagine this guy's face next door. And I ask myself, I'm just inquiring, what feels so threatening about this person? Why do I feel so much fear around this person? My heart's still like thumping away, and I'm just still feeling really anxious, and I'm kind of but I feel very sure that this inquiry is the direction I want to go. The next question I'm asking is just like, what is this sound hitting into? I hear loud sounds all the time. I don't have a problem with loud sounds, but this particular loud sound is hitting into something in my body. It feels like it's attacking me. So what is so threatening about this sound? And as I sink into that inquiry, it kind of goes deeper and deeper, and I'm just repeating it and repeating it. And it's like an alchemical switch, a complete shift in my relationship with this sound. It goes from being something that is extremely threatening to something that I'm part of in a way. My body just completely, just peace sort of just goes through my body at that moment of like really just embracing this sound. And suddenly I can't distinguish the sound from myself. It goes from a very polarized place to like me just feeling a lot of love and openness towards this sound and this person. And it was just a really incredible moment, because the feeling of peace, I suppose, because my initial state of anxiety was so high, the stakes were incredibly high. So when that flip happened of that kind of peace going through me and just totally accepting this sound into my experience, when that happened, it went as intensely the other way. The embrace was as strong. And I thought that it's a really nice example of a time in my life where what was initially definitely a weed, definitely something that was a pain and something I couldn't get rid of, and something repeating, incessant, tenacious thing of like being kept up every night, having these situations kick off, to become blossoming into this flower and like becoming this very beautiful moment.
And you listen to Big Bang Theory every day ever since.
No, I still hate that show.
You joined the Facebook group for it. Bought one of those t-shirts that's like, God, there was some guy I knew who had one of the t-shirts that Sheldon wears. Can't remember.
You are asking the wrong person.
Yeah, clearly. That's it. When you were saying about imagining the guy's face, I thought you were going to be like, what is it that this guy finds funny about this show? You're going to try and really get into his mind
what
state.
What in the world do you find funny about this show? Because I just don't get it. It's like an alien species.
Yeah, that's interesting, that moment of it just flipping and turning into quite a beautiful experience.
It's a situation that I think a lot of people will be familiar with on some level, of moments of like really intense suffering being a catalyst into something very, very different. It can be a moment of just completely accepting a situation, which is what happened then. Yeah, because it's like being so up against it and like really resisting it to just yielding and just surrendering to what is going on. And there's something very special about moments like that. I think they're very I think they kind of give you a lot of faith in like situations of suffering like that have so much potential in them because of the energy that's there, the intense desire for change and the intense desire for like, I've got to do something about this, that they can just be so transformational, I think.
Well, I think that seems like a good place to end it.
So next week's quote, it's a bit different, this one. I'm quite excited about it. So this is from a book that I'm reading at the moment called The Secret History by Donna Tartt. We don't like to admit it, but the idea of losing control is one that fascinates controlled people such as ourselves more than almost anything.
That's a good one. All right. Well, we'll see you next week, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Enjoy the rest of your week. Have a good think about the quote. Peace.
See ya.